Hey guys, welcome back. So we are in the middle of winter here now, and as I mentioned in my previous videos, I want to get some winter grows going here. I want to show you guys some good winter cold weather species to do indoors when you're kind of cooped up and can't do much outside really. We're got snow falling outside. We're in December here, so I'm gonna kick it off with a oyster mushroom grow, and I'm gonna be growing one of my favorite strains. I have 3 pounds of spawn ready of the Bratislavian blue oyster mushroom ready to rock. So we're gonna do 3 pasteurized fuel pellet bags just as a demonstration grow. Usually if I'm going to do a big run, I'll be doing like 8 bags, but we're just going to do 3. So we're going to switch it up a little bit too. We're going to do our usual like 2 pounds of fuel pellets, a pinch of gypsum, but I'm also going to add a cup of aspen bedding. This is basically aspen shavings. You can get these at any pet store usually. It's used as pet bedding. And oysters especially like really soft hardwoods, and aspen definitely fits that bill. So shavings don't really work well on their own. I've experimented with them in the past, but when you mix them with the sawdust from the fuel pellets, it makes a nice composite substrate, and the oysters seem to really like it. And I think it'll boost our yields a little bit. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna weigh up the usual 2 pounds of fuel pellets, do our pinch of gypsum, and then I'm gonna do a full, just like level solo cup. This is just a standard 18-ounce solo cup of the aspen shavings into the bag as well. And then we're gonna do our pasteurization with our pre-measured amount of boiling water, or about boiling water, basically 200 to 212. And we're just gonna run the pasteurization. And if you guys have any questions on that process, I do have a video specifically on just how I do my pasteurized fuel pellets. So I go into it in more detail there. I'm going to run through it kind of fast here. So the other thing is we are adding more substrate, but you don't need to do more water. Just do basically, we're going to fill our 2 pounds of fuel pellets, are going to take us right up about to this line right here. We're going to do the same amount of boiling water. So basically what your fuel pellets displace, you want to add about the same amount of water. As I mentioned before, that can vary a little bit depending on your brand of fuel pellets, but that's pretty standard. I am adding the additional cup of aspen shavings, so you'd think you'd have to add more water to hydrate the shavings as well, but I've tested this before and you really don't have to. So just go with the same amount of water as your fuel pellets, like a typical grow I show in my fuel pellet video, and that'll be fine to pasteurize and hydrate everything. Then once our bags have sat for an hour and a half and they're pasteurized, I'm going to go ahead and add a pound of spawn. It's wheat spawn to each bag, and in a few weeks we should have some awesome Bratislavian blue oyster mushrooms. So this strain, it's also called Brat Blue. They're just a beautiful strain. They're great to eat. They dry well, store well. I just love everything about them. I already have the bags labeled right on the filter patch with the strain that I'm growing. It's 2 pounds of fuel pellets weighed up. Add them to our bag. Just have a little cup of granulated gypsum here. Always add just a pinch of that to each bag. That helps keep your sawdust loose for shaking, and it also adds some minerals the mushrooms like. And then it's going to take a cup of our aspen shavings here and just add those right in as well. That's it. That bag's ready for pasteurization. Okay, so we have our bags filled and we have our water boiling and we're all ready for pasteurization here. I have my impulse sealer set to about half power. You may have to adjust yours. Every model's a little different for sealing these standard filter patch bags. You want to get a nice even seal, but obviously not melt your plastic and create a hole. I always have my impulse sealer raised up off the table a little bit. I have it on this plastic tub here. And that just makes it a lot easier for you too, because we're going to add our boiling water. We're going to bring it right over here, make a nice seal at the top, And if you have your impulse sealer up off the table, that's going to make it a lot easier to get a good seal on your bags without squeezing all the air out of your bag. So that's a good tip there. So I'm going to start with our first bag here. Need a little more. Should be good. And we're going to use our funnel here that we made out of a gallon water jug. Helps us hold the bag open. Obviously be careful, guys, you're working with boiling water here, so be very careful as always in respect to that. As soon as you get that water in there, your fuel pellets are going to start expanding right away and the bag's going to fill with steam. And you're basically starting that pasteurization process. So bring it over here. Get a good seal on it. Once your impulse sealer shuts off too, you never want to lift that arm right away because that plastic's really hot under there, and if it sticks a little bit, you'll rip a hole in your bag. So always hold it down for about 5 to 10 seconds after it shuts off, and then go ahead and lift the arm up, and that'll give you a good seal. So I'm going to take these. I have a tub set up off camera here, a nice clean plastic tub. I'm going to pack these in there nice and tight so they can help hold the heat in. And we're going to leave them in the tub for an hour and a half to pasteurize. Okay, I actually have 2 grows going at once here. So I have our Brat Blue oysters and our Hericium Americanum bags in here. They're going to be keeping each other company, snuggling, keeping warm here. So I have them all in the tub. I'm going to put the lid on and I'm going to wrap the whole thing in a blanket. I always put a blanket over the tub to kind of hold the heat in. And they're just going to ride there for about an hour and a half. Our bags are all cooled down and ready for inoculation. We're all set up in front of the flow hood here. I pulled my oyster spawn out. I'll show you that. That's ready to go. I have 3 jars. These quart jars, basically you're looking at about a pound a piece of grain spawn. So we're just going to do 1 jar into each bag. These bags, after they sat hot in the tub for an hour and a half, we just pulled them out of the tub. And I just had them sitting out on the table here. Got some other bags going there, just cooling down. And you need to give them a few hours to cool down because the sawdust really holds the heat. And you don't obviously want to inoculate hot substrate because you're just going to kill your spawn. So definitely give it time to cool down. Fill your bags. Make sure they're basically room temperature. Just maybe a little warm to the touch is fine. And then you're ready to go. So we're set up in front of the flow hood with this pasteurized method. You do not need a flow hood. You could just do this in a clean room. But I have the flow hood, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. I have friends who I've taught how to do this method, and they just do it in a clean room with no flow hood, and they have really high success rates too. So basically what we're going to do is just have everything wiped down with alcohol as well. This is far from like perfect sterile tech, but that's the nice thing about this pasteurization process is you don't need perfect sterile tech. You can get away with it. So but everything is cleaned with rubbing alcohol, and I'm just going to take the scissors. We're going to cut the tops off the bag. Give our spawn a little shake and just dump it in. And once we get the spawn in the bags, we're gonna seal them back up with the impulse sealer here. I have that all ready to go. And once we get them sealed back up, we'll give them a shake and try and evenly distribute that spawn. This is our oyster spawn. We did this with I just sprayed everything down with rubbing alcohol. That's why they're wet on top. But I have some beautiful white linear oyster mycelium there. That's pretty typical of what oyster grain spawn looks like. This is wheat. What I'll do is, like I said, I'll give this jar a little shake and kind of break these loose, and then we'll get them into the bags. So I'm going to set the camera up, and you guys can watch me work in front of the flow hood here. Our oyster bags are all spawned up here, and now we need to check for leaks. Anytime you're doing grows in these filter patch bags, you need to check and make sure you don't have any leaks before you move them to incubation. So I have the flow hood off so I can hear. The way you find leaks is to listen for them. So I have some air trapped in the bag. What I'm going to do is just give it a squeeze, and if you have any leaks, you'll hear the air seeping out. And if you do hear something, all you have to do is take your scissors, cut the top off, and reseal. Usually the leaks are going to be up here if you just didn't get a full seal. But this one's good to go. And we're going to shake and roll here. With these bags, because we have a composite substrate, we have the aspen chips in here as well. We really need to shake these well and make sure everything's evenly distributed. We're trying to evenly distribute not only the aspen shavings into the sawdust, but also the spawn in as well. So what I do after check for leaks is I start squeezing from the bottom up, and that's going to start moving some substrate up to the top, and letting some spawn fall to the bottom. So this is getting the mixing process started, and then we're just gonna shake and roll and make sure you get all the stuff out of the gussets that you can here. Sometimes you have some wet sawdust stuck in these gussets down here. You want to get that out so you can get it all mixed and evenly distributed. These bags can take a pretty good beating as long as you get a good seal on them. So you can be a little rough with them. Obviously, don't go crazy. And when you're done shaking, again, try and shake the sawdust out of these gussets up here, because you want everything back down on your block. You want the spawn to be able to reach everything that's in there. So make sure your top's fairly level. And then I just give them a few knocks on the table to pack them a little bit, and that's good to go. So these are going to go on just some wire incubation shelves. It's probably going to take a week or two for full colonization. Oyster's so aggressive, you really need to monitor it. Once you get to full colonization, you need to take some steps to move it into fruiting. And you can't wait too long, because oyster's so aggressive it'll start pinning on top here, where it's getting some fresh air exchange through the filter patch. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But for now, these bags are ready to go on the incubation shelves, and we'll come back when they're fully colonized. It is fruiting time. Our blocks are fully colonized. You can see we have some nice white linear mycelium starting to climb up the sides of the bag. And we got some metabolite on top. And so these are definitely ready to fruit. So got a couple things you need for this part of the process. Some packing tape, a good sharp pair of scissors, and I'm using a scalpel. You could also use just a sharp X-Acto knife. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to cut the corners off the tops of these bags, and that's going to allow me to fold the plastic back, because I'm going to fold this plastic back tight and tape it to the back of the bag here, because what I want to do is I want to eliminate any free airspace on top of this block, and that's going to force the oyster mushrooms to fruit out these holes that I'm going to cut. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the scalpel to just cut where I've marked here. I marked this block or this bag so you guys could see where I'm going to cut. When you do this, I'm going to wipe the scalpel down with a little rubbing alcohol too to sanitize it. But you don't want to cut into your block really far. You want to basically damage the surface of your block and the mycelium as little as possible. You are going to cut into it. Obviously, there's no way to avoid that because the bag's pretty tight to the substrate. It will heal up and pins should quickly form. I'm going to move, once I have the bags all set, I'm going to move them into our humidity chamber here that we have all set up. And we have the ultrasonic humidifier going on our repeat cycle timer over here, and we're at a little over 90% humidity right now. And for oysters to pin, you want to be pretty high humidity. You want to be I may even kick it up a little bit. You want to definitely be around that 95 to 100% mark for pinning. Oysters really like a ton of humidity, especially during the pinning phase. So as I mentioned, the first thing you're going to want to do is just cut the corners off your bag. It's going to allow some air to escape from inside the bag and allow you to fold this back and tape it. So I'm going to make sure our gussets are tucked in nice and neat here. I'm going to fold that back. So I'm going to get that as tight as I can on top of the block. You want to fold it back really tight because you want to eliminate any airspace up here. Just use your piece of packing tape. Just tape it down nice and tight. Just like that. And now that we've done that, we're ready to cut our slits. But the nice thing about the X-shaped slits is that you also have, it's not a wide open hole. You still have the flaps kind of sitting there. So that'll hold some humidity in the area you're exposing and help promote pinning. Because as I mentioned, you want really high humidity at your pinning sites. So that's why I like to use this method. So we're just gonna just carefully cut. And I'm going a little bigger than what I've marked here. I'd say each cut is, you know, about 1 inch and about 1 inch. Okay, so you can see all our fruiting holes are cut, and we just had these nice little flaps here. And this is where we're gonna get our pins. So this block's ready to go into the fruiting chamber. Okay, we have all 3 bags in our humidity chamber here. We have our ultrasonic running. You can see the visible mist going in there. So we do have a fan on the ultrasonic, obviously pumping some visible mist into the chamber. But I also have slits cut on 3 sides of the chamber here to give it some extra fresh air. And oysters need, as I mentioned, really high humidity to pin properly, so I'm going to try and keep it 95% or above inside the chamber. And obviously we need light. We have 2 6500K fluorescents that are going to run 12 on, 12 off. And you know, you do have to make sure they're getting enough fresh air too, even when they're pinning, because they will get leggy on you really fast. I cut 5 slits in each one of these bags, but you don't have to do that. If you just want one giant cluster, you can just do 1 slit. You could do 3, 5, whatever you want to do. I like usually, you know, several smaller clusters with my oysters, so that's what I went with here. Probably in a couple days I'll have some pins to show you. Oyster grow update time. We are pinning in a big way here, guys. Look at that. These things are absolutely exploding. There's some little cluster coming out of our slit. Massive ones there, massive ones over here. And this one down here is just starting. See if I can get it in there. See that little cluster coming out of the slit right there? What I did is I left these in the chamber after my last clip there for a few days, and they just weren't looking like they wanted to pin. And no doubt if I would have left them for like probably, you know, 6-7 days, they would have pinned on their own for sure. But I wanted to speed them up. So what I did is I put them in this plastic tub right here, and I just took a clean towel, got it moist, and I put all 3 blocks in this tub, laid the towel over top of them, put the lid on it, and I moved it out to my garage. And we're in the middle of winter here, so my garage is like 40 degrees. And I left them out there for about 24 hours. And then I brought them back in here, and within a couple days, they were just absolutely exploding. So the cold shock probably got them rolling a couple days faster. I am super excited because our Bratislavian blue oysters are finally ready to be picked here. We have some massive clusters. This is the first flush. I'll probably keep these around for 2 or 3 flushes, but these big clusters are definitely ready to pick. With oysters, you want to try and pick them before the cap margin elevates to plane. And what that means is the edge of the cap right here, see how it's still just slightly curled under, kind of like an umbrella. Very soon, these will elevate to flat, and then they'll actually turn up. And at that point, they just massively release spores, and the texture of the mushroom starts to suffer. So you want to get them before they get to that point. And these are there. So I am going to set the camera up and show you how I pick these. It's pretty simple. You can see this is common with Pasteurized strains of oyster, that they make just way more pins than they can possibly support energy wise. They're just the eternal optimists of the mushroom world, and it's real common to have a bunch of these little pins abort like you see here. With those, you just, once you pick the cluster, you can just kind of peel them away and discard them. So with Pasteurized strains, which this one is, the stems are pretty tough and stringy at a certain point. So what I usually do is, if I'm going to eat them, I'll trim them about halfway, maybe a little above half, because when you get up here, the stem's fine. It's just when you get down near the base, it gets really hard, woody, stringy, and you don't want to eat that. But you can definitely save the bases for any medicinal extractions. If you want to make a tea or a tincture, you can throw them in there. Oyster mushrooms are really good to eat. They also are full of a lot of the medicinal goodies that people want to get out of the mushrooms, like the polysaccharides, the beta glucans. Just save those stem butts. You could make some mushroom stock out of them, or use them in a medicinal extraction. So I'm gonna set the camera up and I'll harvest some of these clusters. So the way to pick these, especially these monster clusters here, is to just kind of cradle them and twist, and they should break off. But the edges of the cap are fairly fragile, so you want to be kind of careful with them. So there's one cluster right there. Kind of cradle it and gently twist, and that's it. They'll pop right off. Substrate, you may lose a little substrate there when you pick them, but not a big deal. That mycelium will recover really quickly, heal over, and pop more mushrooms. I peeled a couple away from the main cluster here, and you can kind of feel where the stem gets tough. Stems on these aren't really too bad. It's kind of personal preference. If you don't mind a little chew in your mushrooms, you can go a little closer to the end, but usually just take a good sharp knife, trim it off like that, and that's what I'll chop up and cook. A couple ways I like to cook these, and a lot of mushrooms actually, is I'll chop them up and I'll just toss them in a little extra virgin olive oil and some good soy sauce, and just let them sit in that for a little bit, and maybe a half hour or so. And then I'll just throw them in a pan and saute them up until the edges of the mushrooms just start to caramelize, and at that point they'll have a really great nutty flavor. Show you what kind of weight I'm getting per flush here with these 6-pound pasteurized fuel pellet blocks too with this strain. I had to pick this cluster before I could even get it out of the fruiting chamber. Actually, it was so big. So just that one cluster is 9 ounces, a little over 9 ounces. And obviously the rest of them aren't as big here, but get them all on there. Even that little cluster looks really nice. So first flush, looks like that's actually 7/8, so that's almost 15 ounces. So just under a pound first flush. So subsequent flushes, usually I hold them for 3 flushes, and then after that it's time to chuck them, compost them. But yeah, I'd say probably looking at maybe just under 2 pounds total, I'd say, for the run of the block. So not too bad, probably a little lower than what you would get with the supplemented sawdust, but just the process is so much easier for pasteurization, unless you have, you know, big time autoclave sterilization equipment. That's basically oyster mushrooms from start to finish. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll be testing more strains definitely as time goes on, featuring tons of different oyster strains, and I can't wait to try out some new ones. So let me know what you guys think in comments, and what your own experiences are growing oysters, and I'll see you next video.